And now, Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks.
Hey everybody, what's going on? DJ Bucky here, Move the Sticks, and we have a big answer pod today. You put out the hashtag AskMTS. Hit us up with any questions that you have, and we are going to roll through those today and answer those questions. But before we get there, Buck, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm great, DJ. Can't complain. I love this part of the process. Like, we're a couple weeks away from the Combine, and you know the Combine is kind of like the kickoff point in terms of when everyone begins to kind of figure out what their team is going to do in the draft. And obviously the subculture of like drafting, speculation, mock drafting, that has kind of really, grown tenfold since I got in this in 2007. But it's bananas, but it's the best part. It's the best part of the year for anybody who's a scout.
Yeah, and for those that think that that you're the only ones out there that pay attention to mock drafts, trust me, the players keep an eye on it too. Had a chance to go out and watch some guys work out yesterday. And Christian Kirk was one of those guys, and he had mentioned he knew who we had the Arizona Cardinals taking in the mock draft. So the players keep up with this stuff as well, anxious to find out who their teammates are going to be. So it is fun. I know that mock drafts, especially this early in the process, not going to be the most accurate, Buck, but it's a good talking point, and people are interested as we kind of gear towards what I believe by far is the best offseason of any of the major sports in football.
Yeah, I think the NFL has done a great job of making football or the NFL relevant 365, 12 months a year. There's always something, a jump-off point where we can bring the NFL back to focus. And, going into the Combine, being able to just kind of speculate on which players are going to be where, combined with free agency at that time, it's just a really, really good time. And so even though we're not watching games necessarily with the NFL on the field, the speculation about how it could look or how it will look when they do return to the field always kind of drives our industry.
Yeah, and one more thing here before we get to these questions. I mentioned I was watching some guys work out, one of which was Joe Burrow, who's working out throwing with Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Kyle Allen from the Panthers out there, all those guys out at J. Sarah High School. What is it, San Clemente, right, Buck?
Yeah,
out there throwing the ball around. So it was fun to watch them go out there and work.
Yeah, San Clemente High School, which is where Sam Darnold's from.
That's a beautiful school, bro.
Yeah.
Is that Scott? That's Scott Boras money. That's that sweet Scott Boras money there.
So it's funny. They've always gone by the moniker down there, one town, one team. One team, one town, however they reference it. Because it is kind of a beachy town away from it. Everything is right there. And they've had a tremendous amount of success the last few years. They've had quarterbacks come out of there. Sam Darnold, I want to say Jack Sears. Maybe from
that was San Clemente High School, right? This was over at this was J. Sarah.
Oh, you're at J. Sarah. My bad. J. Sarah is also. You talk about a picturesque high school. Now that's a money high school.
My gosh, Buck.
Yeah, I think Pat Harlow.
Yeah.
I think Pat Harlow is the head coach at J. Sarah.
Yes,
USC alum. He's done a really good job of bringing it up. But if you can imagine, I know our Southern Cal listeners will know this. They compete in the Trinity League. And so the Trinity League, St. John's Bosco, Servite, Orange Lutheran, Mater Dei, J. Sarah, Santa Margarita. You're talking about like some heavy hitters. It's the high school version of the SEC. And so they are a team that is always kind of competing and trying to climb the rung. But look, man, a lot of talent down there in Orange County. A lot of good players, a lot of good coaches.
I'll have a chance during the Combine coverage to kind of go into a little deeper detail in my conversation with Joe Burrow and visiting with him. But one thing I want to share here for you and for our listeners, Buck, the question, and he knows it, I said the question you're going to get asked when you go to the Combine more than any other is why the drastic jump from one year to the next. And I feel like we jumped into this topic a few weeks back, and it very much lined up with kind of what our theory was on that, Buck. And he said, look, a lot of times these grad transfers, they arrive in the spring, have spring ball, then they go through summer camp, and then they go out there and play. He said, I got to LSU after the freshmen had already reported in the fall. So, he literally got there at the start of camp. That's the first time he gets a playbook.
Oh, okay.
Then we start talking about offense and scheme and fit, and right away he gets in there and competes for that job. But he said, look, what his game is, and we saw it this year just explode. They were a lot of 7-man protection his first year there at LSU. So you get into a new system. You're keeping everybody in. You don't have options out in the route. You've got no room because everything's just clogged in the middle of the field. And he said, this new offense comes in. He gets a chance to master it. He gets a chance to get really comfortable with it. And then they realize You know, and talking to him, like one of his greatest strengths is his vision. And so give me more options. Let's get people out. Let's go 5-man protection. Let's empty this thing out, and then let me see. You play with the tight end out there, but let's get everybody out in the route because he can feel pressure. He's athletic. He's got tremendous vision, and he can find answers to the test. And so then you just had a perfect situation of that matching what he does extremely well. So to me, you've talked about it before, Buck, that you don't just drop him in to any system and he's going to explode and do great. You've got to build around what he does, which I think is true for most guys. Mm-hmm. But I just think with him, if you can draft him, you're not going to be a heavy play action team. You're not going to be, 6-7-man protection at all times. You're going to be in the gun. You're going to spread people out, and you're going to let him dissect people. And then when you want to rush 3, he can sit back there and take all day if he wants. Or he's going to be able to find lanes with his athleticism. He's going to go take those yards with his legs. So it's kind of a pick your poison situation. But I think if you can put in place what he's proven he is elite at and comfortable at in that system, I mean, I think the sky is the limit for what this kid can be at the next level.
Yeah, I think the sky is the limit. And I think as we continue to look at Joe Burrow and look at the way young quarterbacks have been able to have immediate success, it has been coaches willing to take them where they are and build around where they are as they continue to add other elements to the offensive playbook. We've seen this, like Lamar Jackson wins the MVP because they revamped their entire offensive system to enable him to be able to play was in a way that is very, very comfortable to him. If we look at Pat Mahomes redshirted for a year, but part of the redshirt year was enabling Andy Reid to look at Pat Mahomes' strengths and weaknesses and build and tweak an offensive system around how he plays. I think the old way of looking at quarterbacks, like, hey, we got to get him in, we got to teach them how to play the pro way. Yeah, that you don't have enough time for that because the clock is running immediately when you draft a young quarterback high, that you have a 5-year window to get to the Super Bowl and win it before it becomes a different situation where the team has to flip because now you're going to pay the quarterback a lot of money and you're not going to be able to build it the other way. The best way to do it is to take the quarterback, build the system around him, supplement him with the pieces that he needs early, and then you hope by year 5 he is able to kind of carry it forward, and then you can lose some of the other stuff that you were paying out because now more of the money has to go to him.
I want to give you a couple numbers here because I think I looked this up and it really surprised me. So, and we've theorized here before about the importance. We're seeing some of these air raid quarterbacks be successful, and one of the things we've talked about is, look, they get to throw the ball a lot, so they get a lot of those reps, which are going to help you at the next level. So you go back through, and we talk about Pat Mahomes. Mahomes threw the ball 1,349 times in college, right? That's a huge number. I went through and looked through all the quarterbacks in the top 15 in the league, Buck, and just used passer rating, right? And so I'm just going to run through the number of pass attempts that they had. So actually, you know what? I'll give you the guys that were under 1,000. So Tannehill was 774. Breeze 1,600, way up there. Everybody, all these guys over. Stafford was only 987. Aaron Rodgers was one of the lowest, 665. Because he was only at Cal there. These are career pass attempts. And then Wentz was 612, obviously for the injuries. But everybody else from, Breeze, Lamar Jackson, Cousins, Wilson, Stafford, Mahomes, Carr, Dak, Watson, Matt Ryan, all those guys over 1,000, a lot of passing attempts in college. So I went through and pulled out the top 5 guys from this year's group. We've got Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love, Eason, Fromm. And this was just, I don't know why this struck me, but Jake Fromm feels like he's been at Georgia for 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. Jake Fromm had 983 pass attempts. Joe Burrow had 945. Because doesn't it feel like Joe Burrow was kind of the one-year guy, like not a lot of he threw the ball in the touchdowns. Fromm threw 78 touchdowns, 18 picks. Burrow 78 touchdowns, 11 picks. How about this one, Buck? Tua, 684 pass attempts in college. Would you have believed that Burrow has almost 300 more pass attempts than Tua in their college career?
Man, that's crazy.
That shocked me when I saw that.
It is shocking, and I think Tua is 87.
Tua was 87 touchdowns, 11 picks. I mean, yeah.
I mean, wow. Like you talk about, that's a third more throws that you're basically we're talking about. Like, I mean,
that was weird to me. I don't know why that just shocked me because we feel like we've been watching Tua forever, I guess is what it is. But
yeah, I mean, look, as much as I can talk about Tua and champion the flag, he really is also just kind of like a real 1 year starter. Like when you add up all of his things, it's a little over 1 year of real game experience. Joe Burrow has 2 years of starts. We could talk about him being a bit of a 1 year wonder based on the season that he just had. But, hey, give him credit for being able to do it. I think a couple things with Joe Burrow. One, Joe Burrow is older and experienced. Like you talk about the throws. That age and maturity should help him when we talk about transitioning into the league. The system stuff that you talked about, like with him, I wrote down in my notes when I was breaking them down. I said, man, this dude is an RPO master. The way that he is able to just quickly decipher and get the ball in and out, like that works well. And for years, we've seen Tom Brady and Drew Brees pick people apart, Aaron Rodgers pick people apart because they are masters of the quick game. And I know that a lot of times we'll talk about arm strength, and even I'm guilty of this too. We talk about arm strength and being able to push the ball down the field. But when you really look at it, the top quarterbacks, the top pocket quarterbacks have been guys that have been masters of the 10-yard and under throw. They're so accurate, so decisive, so quick. They understand how to stretch the defense horizontally, and their quick decisions enable them to really pick apart a defense before they can get ready. So as we continue to dig into the Joe Burrow thing, I think that works. And I think something that we've talked to other people about, we talked to Clay Helton. Well, yesterday I was on the phone with an NFL defensive coordinator, and he talked about, I proposed the theory that you said, like having defensive guys evaluate offensive talent. He was like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. He said, like, look, if I'm a DB coach, I know exactly what gives us problems at wide receiver. He said the same thing with quarterback. And the number one thing that he said, when you look at quarterbacks, vision, can they see it, can they spot it? He said, look, I played basketball, and playing point guard is very similar to playing quarterback. You have to anticipate where guys are going down the wings and those things. And so it just kind of tied in a lot of the theories and premises that we've talked about with quarterback and why your quarterback has to have certain traits. And the fact that Joe Burrow was an all-state basketball player, I think it kind of correlates to how he plays the position from the pocket.
I asked him that too. I said, how do you think your basketball has helped you? And he's like, no, I think there is something to that. And he said more than anything else, he kind of echoed what Urban Meyer said, which was just, I just think you do a disservice to yourself when you're just playing one sport. You get a chance to compete year round. He's a competition junkie. He just wants to be out there and compete. But when it comes to the vision thing, that was one of the things he also mentioned, just talking about his strength. He's like, look, even if we're trying to work right or left, he's like, I can kind of take a picture in my mind and kind of see the whole field. Mm-hmm. And we had a quarterback coach, I don't even remember which one it was when I was coming up, Buck, that you said as a quarterback you got to be able to stand on the front porch and see all the way around the house.
Yeah.
I just always think about that.
Yeah.
Like that's your vision, to be able to see everything. And that is unique, man. That is a big time skill, to be able to see everything at once and not have to work from sections of the field.
Yeah, I think basketball does that. And DJ, was funny because when we look at the top quarterbacks, a lot of those guys are dual threat players, but also had multi-sport backgrounds. And as much as we talk about basketball and the vision, I think vision is also necessary in baseball in terms of if you play middle infield and turning to and feel and anticipation and all those other things. We can talk about Pat Mahomes' arm angles and all of that, but also just imagine like having to throw around base runners coming at you, trying to turn to and all of that other stuff, because Russell Wilson played second base and played in the infield. All of those things matter. And so, look, we're at a weird time in youth sports where we have so many coaches selfishly trying to get guys to play one sport and to specialize, when we're seeing, and the evidence, not only statistically, but visually, when we look at the top players have played other sports because it allows you to build other skills.
No doubt. And we'll move on here. I do want to finish up the numbers here just because I know some people are probably listening and wondering about the other guys. Herbert, 1,293 pass attempts. Love, 1,125. Eason, 782. So that's kind of where those guys are with the amount of reps and attempts that they've got. The other thing I would add on Burrow, mentioning that first year, and I mentioned getting there late in an offense that doesn't necessarily ideally suit him. The other thing, he was like, look, I haven't really played in 3 years. Like this, you got to knock some of that rust off now when you haven't played. So it was It was interesting. It was a good conversation. I'll say this about him. Biggest takeaway from it, he is highly intelligent, highly confident. And sometimes when you get that combination, Buck, it can rub people the wrong way. It is not with this kid at all. Like, it's very authentic. It's very real. I think the word swagger is kind of thrown around and maybe overused, Buck. That dude he is dripping with swagger. He has got so much confidence, man. So I enjoyed visiting with him.
No, it's funny. So DJ, here's what you know from playing the position. The quarterback position requires a lot of different things. We can talk about the physical talent. We can talk about the intellect. We can talk about the leadership ability. The other thing that I believe is important, the best ones, they have a relatability. And so the high IQ and confidence and the real swag that you allude to, that brings people in towards you. So I'm a big believer in going to games and watching how people react to the quarterback. And every time I watched LSU play, I felt like the LSU players were genuinely happy for the success that Joe Burrow had. And I think we've been around the game enough to know that we've seen quarterbacks who have put up big numbers and have had a lot of individual accolades. And when they go get the award, the rest of the team is on the other side of the field because they don't really care about him. Every time we saw Joe Burrow do something that was another notable accomplishment, I felt like the entire squad was there. And so that swagger that you talk about, him projecting, I think is real, is genuine, and I think is one of those things that in a locker room works really, really well. Much like, and I'll say this, like much like Baker Mayfield kind of had that as well. There's something to your quarterback being the Pied Piper. That is kind of one of those unknown quantities that you're looking for, but you have to have it because it really shows up when you get kind of down to the nitty gritty.
All right, no doubt. All right, well, that was fun, man. I was glad we got to get into that discussion there as we launch into these questions. All right, we put out the hashtag AskMTS. You guys dropped questions. We can keep that going, too. If you have other questions along the line, drop them on that hashtag. Nabil is going to collect these as we go through the spring, and we'll have little segments throughout the pod before we get to the draft where we'll drop some of these in. So, Nabil, how many questions did we end up coming up with here, Nabil, out of this pile?
Oh, we got a bunch of them, but I narrowed it down to 15.
All right.
Okay. 15 questions, Buck. So we've got the list here. Let's go every other one. All right. I'll start off here. Hit you up with this one. Assuming A.J. Green returns to the Bengals and with a healthy O-line, would Joe Burrow be walking into the most talent-rich offensive situation a number one pick has had in recent memory? That's from @DLBNO.
Ooh, the most talent-rich. I don't know if it's the most talent-rich situation. I felt like Andrew Luck walked into a decent situation because he had.
Can I give
Reggie
you my
Wayne
answer?
And whatever. What were you going to say?
So I went back and I cheated. I looked at this question. So I went back and I looked up some of these. And I'll be darned, Buck. Because Luck had, I think T.Y. came in his class.
T.Y. he had Reggie Wayne already there.
The offensive line was not good. They didn't have a big-time back. So that one wasn't great. I went through all these guys. I came down and I thought, it is one of the best. The one that I would put above it is Cam Newton. Cam Newton went to Carolina with Steve Smith. You had Ryan Khalil was an all-pro center at that time. You still had Jordan Gross. You had D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart in the backfield. Like, that's a lot. You got a lot of dudes there. I think LaFell might have been their second receiver. Okay, but I mean Steve Smith's a Hall of Fame player.
Right.
You've got 2 Pro Bowl caliber backs and you've got 2 Pro Bowl caliber linemen. That was a pretty good setup there for Cam.
That is a pretty good setup. But I will say this about the Cincinnati Bengals. When you look at this situation on paper, and I know there have been rumors and conversation about Joe Burrow not wanting to go to Cincinnati. However, when we talk about Joe Burrow and what he would probably need around him, man, Joe Mixon is a Pro Bowl caliber running back. A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd, that's a nice combination at wide receiver if they re-sign A.J. Green. And Tyler Boyd is a nice number 2. The only question that I would have, 2 questions that I have about Cincinnati in terms of Joe Burrow, the offensive line. I'm not fully confident in the offensive line being kind of like an upper echelon offensive line. And then the second thing would be, what can Zach Taylor do in his second season as a head coach? Is he better equipped to call an offense and to build a team around a young quarterback like Joe Burrow? My question would just center around the offensive line and coaching. But from a personnel standpoint, I've certainly seen number one picks inherit worse situations, fall into worse situations. This isn't a bad situation for him to fall into.
No, I agree with you. All right, what's the next question here, Buck?
Here we go. What, in your opinion, is the most challenging part of scouting? What is the most enjoyable? Man, this is interesting.
I can simplify this. The most challenging thing is figuring out the kid, right? And then the most enjoyable thing for me is watching the tape. That's my simple answer to that one.
That's funny. So my thing was the challenging part was the projection as it comes from college to the pros, because it's really an apples to oranges evaluation. You're watching kids play against kids, whereas when they go into the National Football League, they're playing against some of the best men that you'll find, and sometimes you just don't know how they're going to project when they get out of their comfort zone in college. Scheme, environment, money, all those other things. And so that is the toughest thing, the projection part. The most enjoyable part is when you're a part of a team, is being a part of a team that goes on and has success at a high level, meaning winning playoff games, winning division titles, being able to win a Super Bowl. I think that would be the most enjoyable part, because as a scout, it's different. Your report card comes later. Your report card is down the line, 3-4 years down the line, whereas coaches, they get evaluated each week. Hey, we either passed or failed the class on Sunday. Scouts and evaluators, it's a little longer. So, yeah, the challenging part is seeing how it all plays out down the road.
Yeah, I think you said that beautifully. Just to summarize what I was saying, just trying to figure out, I think watching the tape and watching the players, that's gotten to the point where it's not too difficult to figure out who can play. Mm-hmm. But then what makes these guys tick, what's their character like, especially on the outside when you're not with the team, that's a hard part for us. So that's kind of how I would break that down. All right, the next question, what QB evaluation have you been the most wrong about? Is that player was that player much better than your grade at the NFL level, and what did that teach you? And that's a question from at Brandon Dower. Brandon, that's a question. Look, we can go through and find tons of them, Buck. I would say you're always trying to learn lessons on guys you get right or guys you get wrong. That's why we do the hits and misses. But I feel like two guys, Patrick Mahomes. Yep. I know I mentioned that he's, was a boomer bust, high ceiling, low floor. Obviously, he's hit the ceiling. So in some ways, I feel like, okay, I knew he had this capabilities. I bet on the under. I should have bet on the over. And I think the lesson that I took from that was, man, we got to talk to him that late in the process, and we're so impressed with him, with his intelligence, his recall, his leadership personality, everything about him, being around him was, man, you got to find a way to get some time with these kids earlier on in the process. That was my lesson with Mahomes. And then Russell Wilson, who's one that I loved as a player, Buck, but I still put a ceiling on him in terms of where to put the grade because of his height, and I think we've seen the rest of the league kind of learn that lesson collectively.
Yeah, it's funny. Pat Mahomes is the one for me. Pat Mahomes is a guy that I struggled with in the evaluation part of it. Like I struggled with trying to figure out what he could be at the next level, because I'd never seen this kind of thing before. I'd never seen a player who played the way that he played at Texas Tech and have sustainable success, meaning he was a sandlot player at Texas Tech. He had to do a lot. Obviously, we mentioned the number of throws that he had. He didn't have a lot of high-end or NFL talent. And so I just worried about the bad habits that maybe he formed at Texas Tech trying to make these plays, because we would see these improbable throws where he's rolling left, throwing back right, all the things that coaches tell young quarterbacks not to do. And we saw him kind of living on the edge. And I just wondered if any coach in the pros would be able to kind of reel him back in. The talent was there. The other stuff was there. But still, at the time when he came out, we hadn't seen a lot of success from air raid quarterbacks. And so because of that, look, I downgraded him. I downgraded him because of the I would call it frenetic style and the lack of track record for air raid quarterbacks. And so it kind of left me to leave him as kind of like a projected second-round guy based on how I thought he would play. And he surpassed all of that. And you're right. Late in the process, we got a chance to sit with him on this podcast. He sat right here in the studio, and we talked to him. And when he walked out the door, we said, ooh, man, I wish we had talked to him earlier before we did the top 50, before we did the top 5, because he was smart. Yeah. He had tremendous recall. I remember you asking him a question about a play maybe against Kansas State, and he was able to dial it up precisely. And so the great quarterbacks, the great players, they live and breathe it. That interaction that we had with Pat Mahomes here, I was like, man, this dude kind of lives it. He kind of breathes it. Like he kind of has that it. So Pat Mahomes to me is the evaluation that I got wrong and that I really learned a lot from.
Yeah, and I think that another way I would say a lesson that I tried to take from that was if you have guys that are quote unquote kind of a boomer bust, a lot of times that comes down to the kid. Like, what makes him tick? How motivated is he? How passionate is he? He might not be where he needs to be right now, but if he's got that upside, to me, gamble. The guys you want to gamble on, the guys with upside that have all the intangibles. So if you've got the upside and the intangibles, lesson learned on my end. Like, okay, go in on those guys. Don't worry about it. Take your shot.
Yeah, no, it's something to be learned. Like he just is a guy that makes a ton of plays, and you just didn't know. And I think that is why we always talk about, like, get to know the kid. And I think a lot of it is bet on the kid, bet on the character of the kid. Here we go. The fourth question, which team should move up in the first round of the draft and for who? That's at Mr. Jekyll 48. Man, this is an interesting question. I think.
What do you think?
I think moving up in the first round, I think it's about having currency and having a player that you want to target. The two teams that I think have the currency in the first round, the Miami Dolphins and the Oakland Raiders. And when you move up, you're moving up to target a blue chip player. I think if you're the Miami Dolphins, and depending on how this quarterback thing shakes out, Joe Burrow, Tua, Tagovailoa, either one, I think you move up to ensure that you get one of those quarterbacks. If you feel like those two guys are separate and apart from other guys, I think you have to make the move to get the franchise quarterback of your choice. So I'm the Miami Dolphins. I target one of those quarterbacks. Assuming Joe Burrow goes, then I'm moving up to get to the number 2 position to make sure that I can get to it.
Yeah, I like that. I'd throw the Chargers in there too. I think there's some urgency there going into a new building. Phillip Rivers has moved on to be able to find your quarterback. Now, they don't have all those extra picks, but they have a very talented roster, Buck. So either you can get creative and package players with picks, or you spend this next period of time once the league year starts to be able to maybe trade some veterans, acquire some picks, and kind of increase your arsenal there so you have what you need if you wanted to move up for a guy like Tua. So I'd keep an eye on them. All right, next question. Let's go here.
5.
I think we kind of touched on the one right after that, Buck. It's the same. That's kind of the same question we just answered. So let's go to the next one. Do you think CeeDee Lamb is too tempting for the Cardinals to pass on over an offensive lineman, reuniting Murray and CeeDee Lamb? This is an interesting question. And while I love CeeDee Lamb, Buck, let me give you my theory on why I think I would go the offensive line route. Number one, protecting Kirk. Not only do you want to, protecting Kirk, protecting Kyler Murray. You want to be able to keep him healthy. But it's not only that, Buck. It's not even keeping him healthy. You remember early in the year, they tried to get everybody out in the route they couldn't protect. And then you saw Kingsbury start playing with more tight ends, had to adjust what he was doing to help give him some time. And it was a lot of 2-man, 3-man routes. Well, for that offense to go as they envision it, they got to get more guys out. And the only way you can get more guys out is if you're better up front. So while I love CeeDee Lamb, I am the president of the CeeDee Lamb fan club. I think for their offense, it would do them more good and give them more that they could expand in their offense if they got better up front, which would keep them from having to keep those tight ends in.
Look, man, I love the situation. A lot of times, DJ, and we've talked about this. We've talked about in the days leading up to the draft, the exercise that we typically do as a scouting staff. What we do is we kind of assess where are the strengths and the weaknesses in the draft, where is the depth. And so this year, in this class, the strengths, the supply is at wide receiver. The offensive line class is good. Yep. The offensive tackle class is solid. It's solid at the top, though. So if I could tell you that, hey, I could go and get one of the top offensive tackles and then come back and maybe in the second round get a Jalen Reagor or Brandon Ayuk, I think I would take that because the drop-off is so significant at offensive tackle that I would rather get the best offensive tackle that I could get and then maybe get a B-plus wide receiver in the second round because we have seen second-round receivers, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel. We saw Michael Thomas. Those guys have emerged and been big-time playmakers. Yeah, I'm opting for the big guy over the skill guy because in the second round, I can get a skill guy that can be a Pro Bowl caliber player.
100%. All right, well, get us to the next question here, Buck.
Ooh, man, look at this. Rich non-quarterback has the highest ceiling in this draft, offense and defense. Man, this is by @TagAboutNothing. This is interesting to me, and it's interesting to me because there are a couple different guys that kind of pop when I think of it. The first guy that pops and comes to mind, Derrick Brown for Auburn. And I know people talk about, oh, Derrick Brown, he's a blue chip player. Yeah, but I don't think we've given Derrick Brown enough conversation about how good he could be. We've talked about Chase Young being the best defensive player in the draft, but I think we can make a case that even though Chase Young is a generational talent in terms of checking off all the boxes, when you look at Derrick Brown on tape, Derrick Brown does some special things. And I hate to say this because it's almost blasphemous for me to mention him with the name that I'm going to mention, but in Green Bay, I had an opportunity to play with the late Reggie White. And I'm not saying that Derrick Brown is Reggie White, but what I'm saying is some of the things that I saw Derrick Brown do on tape in terms of throwing guys and humping guys, that's the stuff that I remember 92 doing for the Green Bay Packers. And once again, I'm not saying he is that, but Derrick Brown is a grown man. And I just believe at this level, sometimes inside you have to have someone that is an absolute destroyer. He is a destroyer of young men inside.
Yeah, that hump move, which is just taking your inside arm, forklifting the dude up in the air and throwing him aside, what Reggie White did for all those years. You see Derrick Brown do that. I was having a conversation with the GM the other day, and I said, hey, do you like the LSU guard? I just finished watching the LSU guard. I think Damian Lewis is a good football player. He's like, I'm just not that fired up about him. I go, look, did you watch the Auburn? Yeah, I watched. Look. That dude at Auburn does that to everybody. Don't penalize the guard from LSU. He does that to everybody. Go watch some other guys. That guy's not human, okay? So you got to divorce yourself from that. You can't let Derrick Brown wreck and shop on these offensive linemen, allow you to kill the offensive lineman because he did it to everybody he played against.
Look, DJ, and I know we talk about the SEC, and I know the SEC has kind of been put on the pedestal when it comes to producing talent. But sometimes when you just happen to watch guys and you're watching the Auburn tape and you're looking at Derrick Brown just act like a superhero. He's just knocking people around or whatever. He's knocking people around, and I think Marlon Davidson looks at him in film and is like, I guess I'm supposed to knock people around too. Because when I looked at that LSU game, I saw both of those guys. I saw both of those guys just tossing people out the club. It's unbelievable to watch it. But yeah, Derrick Brown is a special player. And I think in any other draft class where we didn't have like these quarterbacks and the fascination about the throwers, we would be talking about the conversation between Derrick Brown, Chase Young. Which one would you want? Which one is going to be the guy that dominates the league for the next 10 years?
I asked Burrow, who's the best player you played against? He said Derrick Brown. I said, who's the second best player you played against? Marlon Davidson. that Auburn defensive line was no joke, man. He was big time dudes. The other upside guys, I would say, Buck, for me, I'll say Simmons, just because Isaiah Simmons can do so many things on defense.
Oh, yeah,
he's
good.
Kind of the new wave player from Clemson. So I'll put him on the upside. And then for the offensive side, non-quarterback upside, I'm going to go Mekhi Becton. From Louisville, because you just at 6'7", 370 pounds to move around like he does. I mean, that's to me the definition of upside, like what you could do with him and what he can be.
Hey, DJ, and I know like talking about offensive tackles isn't necessarily a sexy topic. Like it's not one that's going to generate a lot of clicks, but I had a chance to go back through because I was doing all my top fives, and I was looking at all the offensive tackles at the top of the board or whatever. And, man, I think this is a rare year where you can have your choice. I'm looking at Becton, and I'm writing down in my notes like, oh, dancing bear, strong with light feet and this and that. And then I go right back to Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, oh, dancing bear, light feet, nice technique. Then I'm like, oh, Jedrick Wells, like, oh, dancing bear, nice feet. I just believe this is a special year where you really have like 5 guys that could go in the first round, maybe even more at offensive tackle, but all of these guys should be day one players. And even though some have played right tackle in college, I mean, they have the footwork that would normally be what is required of being a left tackle in the league.
I agree. The next question I feel like we've already kind of answered. Should the Dolphins trade up? You already kind of mentioned that they should, so we can skip that one. Well, let's go to the next one here. Will there be a 3-down linebacker available to the Packers when they pick at 30? They need speed at linebacker and wide receiver is deep, so if Kenneth Murray is there, they'd take him, right? I think I think that would be a great pick for them if they picked Kenneth Murray there. I know he got mad at me the other day, or I don't know.
Kenneth Murray did?
But he retweeted something because you know, one of those deals where you do an interview and they ask you, "Hey, is Kenneth Murray is he Luke Kuechly?" Well,
I'll say this. I'll say this so he can be be mad at me. No, no.
I'm like, he is a good player. He's fast, explosive, but instinct wise, that's a different level there. You know.
No,
So, and I don't put him with the Devons from last year. I don't put him with Devin Bush or Devin White. But he's a really good football player. And at 30, yeah, I'm with that for the Packers.
Okay, so the grade that I gave him, DJ, is right at that it would be right at that borderline first, second round thing. When I looked at him and evaluated him, I was like, look, man, super athletic, quick, fast, sideline to sideline, good blitzer, instincts, has good cover skills. But you know what I never saw? I didn't see a great player in any one area. You know, like, and it was tough because what you're looking to see, hey, can I see him dominate? And it's funny, I watched him and then I watched Zach Bond back to back. And I looked at the Wisconsin kid, and I'm looking at the Wisconsin kid come off the edge. He's making plays. He's tracking people down from the back end. Yep. And so my thing is, when you're looking at the tape, like, you just kind of want to make it easy. Like, if this was a 2 or 3 minute highlight tape, if I'm looking at the highlight tape and I go, ooh, wow, that's what I want to see. I didn't feel like I had enough wow plays from Kenneth Murray. I think, look, if the Green Bay Packers are able to get him at 30, he's a perfect fit for them. He upgrades their athleticism and speed and their sideline-to-sideline playmaking ability. But he's certainly not what we were talking about in Devin Bush and Devin White, those guys that we saw come out a year ago.
No, I agree with you. All right, next one here. What challenges are presented for scouts when teams change systems? How do you communicate scheme fit and scouting reports?
Man,
what do you think, Buck?
So the challenges are, like, when you have a new coach take over. The new coach has to sit with the personnel directors. He has to explain, here's my vision for how I want to play, and here are the kind of players that I want. We are a 3-4 team, and we want the big guys up front to be two gappers, meaning we occupy the gap to the right and the left. So we got to be stout and stronger or whatever. I need these guys in the back end. I want my corners at 6 foot who can jam and reroute. They're more zone corners than man-to-man corners. And so the challenge for scouts, we go out on the road each year looking for certain players that fit how we play. Well, in the fall, if we go looking for something that was previously established and we get turnover, now we got to rework our eyes. We got to redo our grades because we're grading based on how these players would fit in our scheme. And so it's the evaluation flexibility to be able to project a player in multiple systems and those grades corresponding with how they will play in those respective systems.
So this is the way we did it in Philadelphia, which I really liked, and I think a lot of teams do this. You guys might have done this as well, Buck. But you have the summary section, right? So you're writing up the report on the player, what he is, and that goes from, and we've talked about writing reports before, what is his body type, where does he line up, how does he play against the run, how does he play against the pass, how's his effort, speed, athleticism, whatever. So that goes in your summary report. Then underneath that, we had a box called Eagles Value. So underneath that, we would write in there, okay, for us, he plays, he's our Sam linebacker, and he's better or worse than somebody on your roster. So basically, he's a starter for us here at this spot. This is his role for our team. So you get a coaching turnover. You don't have to go back and change your whole summary of your report. That's telling you what he's done and who he is as a player. All you have to do is go back into that little Eagles value and say, okay, now we just switched fronts. So for us now, instead of being this, he's this. And that, to me, puts him, that's a good spot for him, or, not really an ideal fit for the Eagles. And that is a way you kind of clean all that stuff up.
Yeah, that is the way. And so for the aspiring scouts that are listening, one of the tools that you have to be able to have to be a really, really good scout, it's not just your eye, it's your ability to communicate. And so that's not only verbally being able to stand in front of the room and present it, but also being able to write and being able to, Ron Wolf always talked about, can you paint the picture? Can I listen to someone reading your report, close my eyes, and imagine or envision what this player is going to do? And so when we talk about that, being able to communicate, here's how this guy fits, here's how he plays, and sometimes if you can give me a comparison of, hey, he kind of reminds me of this player. It is all to paint the picture on how a player will fit in your system. And so, yeah, the communication skills, the writing skills, they're critical to being able to be a really good scout, to being considered a really good scout, because you have to be able to articulate it.
Yeah, and the comparisons, especially if you can do it with guys on your own roster, like, hey, he's a better rusher than X. with the potential to be better against the run, but there's developments needed or whatever. So you're kind of describing, okay, I don't want to bring a guy in if he's not going to make us better. So compare it to somebody else that we have. Whose job is he eventually going to take? Whose job is he going to take right now? Or how does he slide in? To me, that's a key part. You need to understand your roster. And I think that's one thing that teams need to do a better job with their college scouts, is having their college scouts spend more time studying your own roster. Because, look, you don't want to bring guys in you're going to cut. You want to bring guys in and make your team better. So to me, that's a key part of it. I think that's missed by some teams out there, is understanding your own roster with your scouts.
Yeah, no, it's a very critical part of it, and it's one of those things that everyone has to understand. Like, you have to know your roster, you have to know the league, you have to continue to study the league and figure out what fits. I think in that area, like for me, I had a tough time with offensive linemen because we would see guys on the road and everyone is looking for, I talked about the dancing bear with light feet, where there are a bunch of guys that play that aren't that. Yeah. There are a bunch of guys that are kind of mauler, brawler types that sometimes they're on the ground, but they find a way in certain instances to be able to play. And so you have to kind of know who succeeds, who's playing in the league, and how they're sustaining their success, because that then gives you a point of reference when you're looking at guys down the road.
No doubt. All right.
I'm gonna
go through these last ones.
Yeah, I'm gonna move down because I'm gonna skip the Chiefs first. I'm gonna go to this one because I think this is fascinating. I want to get your take on it. Is Taysom Hill such a rare player, or why don't teams look like 6th and 7th round quarterback prospects and make them into weapons at the NFL level? That is by @BigJohn1906. I think the Taysom Hill conversation is absolutely fascinating to me. I think here's what Taysom Hill is. Taysom Hill, to me, was kind of like the next version of Tim Tebow when I watched him at BYU. He was an outstanding runner. He was a physical playmaker when he had the ball in his hands at BYU, but he was oft injured at BYU. I mean, he had a ton of injuries at BYU that really kind of prevented you from being able to really project him as a player. And then as a quarterback, going back to when he came out, that style of quarterback wasn't in vogue. You didn't see the run-first quarterback viewed as a guy that was optimal, that, hey, this is who we want in the National Football League. And so unless those guys could play multiple positions, unless they were willing to move away from being a quarterback, it made it really hard. And the only way that you could project or really make that projection, you had to talk to him and you had to get some buy-in from the kid. And so the reason why you don't see more teams kind of project guys in this way, a lot of players are unwilling to make that move when you initially suggested during the run-up to the draft.
Well, I think this other thing, too, people need to remember about Taysom Hill is we've had some of these athletic quarterbacks, people have tried to try him in different roles and do different things, and it hasn't always worked out. And some of the reason is because you might get a guy like a Pat White, right, who's fast, really athletic, but he's real skinny. Yeah, even RG3, who was a little bit leaner, Then you look at Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow ran 4.72. Taysom Hill ran 4.44. Like, this is a guy who's, 225 pounds is running 4.4. Like, this is not, like, people kind of act like, oh, you get a Taysom Hill every year. Like, no. There's not 225-pound quarterbacks that run 4.4 that come out every single year. Like, those, even though he was later selection or was a later ad there, it wasn't because of the ability. He was injury prone. He had a ton of injuries there at BYU. It felt like he was at BYU forever. That's why, if he was clean health-wise, he would have got picked. He would have got picked just off of his measurables.
Yeah, he would have got picked off his measurables. And here's what I'll say about the Taysom Hill conversation. I'm sure I'm going to write about it later in the week. You know who Taysom Hill really is? Taysom Hill is Cordell Stewart. So when you go back and you think about Cordell Stewart, when Cordell Stewart was coming out of Colorado, big, physical, fast. You want to give him a chance to play quarterback, but you just didn't know. The Pittsburgh Steelers take him, select him, and what did he do? He was slash, part running back, part receiver, part playmaker. And then he got a shot to be a quarterback. Maybe Taysom Hill is that. The only thing is you didn't know because he was so injured in college. You didn't know how he would hold up. Now, we'll see in the offseason where people really view him as a quarterback. But to me, Taysom Hill is a version and a variation of what Cordell Stewart was early in the league.
Look, people are going to debate what he's going to do and how much success he'll have at quarterback. I'm here for it, man. That's a great storyline in the league. I hope he goes somewhere where they let him start at quarterback. I don't know if he's physically going to hold up over the entire season, Buck, but it's going to be fun to watch. As we've seen the creative offense that the Baltimore Ravens have run, I'm here for it, man. I think it's good for football. I think it's fun to watch. I hope he does get a shot at quarterback.
Look, if he does get a shot, I just think it continues to speak to the revolution that we're seeing at the quarterback position. You're seeing more and more offensive coordinators like, hey, you know what? I need my guy to be a passer plus. He needs to be a good passer, but he also needs to be able to add some other dimensions to our offense. And so, look, man, I'm all for athletic quarterbacks. I'm all for creativity and doing it a little different than it's been done before in the National Football League. So kudos to Taysom Hill.
All right, let's I'll get to this next one here quickly. Some of your favorite small school players. I feel like we've talked about these guys a bunch. But Barch from St. John's, a tackle, had a good week. Kyle Duggar from Lenore-Ryan had a great week. Senior Bowl guys. And then Adam Troutman from Dayton. I know they're all Senior Bowl guys, so technically not like deep cut sleepers. But those are three of my favorite small school guys.
Yeah, I'm with that because if they played at the Senior Bowl, to me, it's just it's about finding players that can play at the highest level. I think the Senior Bowl is a way to start. I think, look, we've been around this for so long. I mean, there's something to knowing guys. We don't have to look up under every rock to try and find the guys. They kind of find their way. I think those three guys that you mentioned, Troutman, Duggar, and Barch, are guys that are small school guys who should have an opportunity to have a lot of success. Okay, here we go.
There's
like 15.
What do you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, we go to the next one. What scouting, team building philosophy do you guys argue about the most? This sentence is all. What scouting, team building philosophy do you guys argue with each other the most about? I think probably the running back thing. I think running backs and draft status because we come from two different schools of thought. I was at a place in Carolina where we valued running backs to the point where we would take them in the first round. I mean, we took guys high and we believed, hey, you take a guy high, and then when he is nearing the end of that first deal, you take another guy high. And so I sat there and watched him when Deshaun Foster was a second-round pick, and then they added D'Angelo Williams was a first-round pick, and then Jonathan Stewart comes on board. And so it's just one of those things where you value them in a different level. I think you come from a different place where you see value in getting running backs a little down the line.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, though, is I've seen it both ways. I mean, I was in Baltimore, and we watched Jamal Lewis rush for 2,000 yards. He was a fifth pick in the draft. So they invested in that there and kind of rode his coattails offensively for a long period of time. So my whole philosophy on the running back thing is simple. I'm not against taking a running back high in the draft. To me, take one with two things. Number one, he's got to be special and elite. Or three things, I should say. He's got to be special and elite. Number two, you don't bypass an elite player at another a quarterback, defensive end, corner. There is still a hierarchy of positions, and I think they slide down there. But I will take a great running back over a good player at some of those other positions, save quarterback. And the last thing I would say is I do like the philosophy of let's try and build out as much of your team as possible and then drop that running back in, that high-pick running back, because then his carries will matter. They'll be useful. If there's a limited number of them, I don't want to waste them on teams that are going to win 5 games.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense because then I think you also would subscribe to the theory of, I'm never paying one. Because I think when you talk about doing it that way where you build out the rest of the team and drop the running back in, you're dropping them, and you can even tell them on the day, hey, man, congratulations. I just want you to know you're not going to be a lifelong whatever. We're going to draft you, and we're going to ride you till the wheels fall off for 5 years, and then we're going to let you get your money elsewhere, but we never will re-sign another running back. And I saw it play out in Seattle. We took Sean Alexander. He was a terrific player for us, played at a tremendous high level. When they made the decision to pay him on that second deal, he was never the same. And so there's something to, draft one high, but make sure when you draft him, that 5 years, we're going to use him. We can use him up, and then we'll let someone else kind of take him after that.
Draft him high. After 5, say bye. That's the philosophy up on the room. All right, 16. Skip that one, Buck. Let's go to the last one here. 17. If you were a GM, what would be on the checklist of things you want out of a draft, meaning certain positions or extra picks? I've always the goal to me was always 3 starters. If you get 3 starters out of a draft, wherever they may fall, that is a really good draft. 4 starters is an unbelievable draft. So to me, I always kind of look at that 3 or 4 starters, and then we've talked about this before. I'm always of the mindset of I want to make a trade every year to get an extra 3 or 4 in the next year's draft. I want some extra capital to go in next year's draft. And the reason is when we get to the trade deadline, I have that little piece, and I'm almost like setting that aside. It's like a savings account. I'm going to have a little piece there, and if we're in it and we've got a chance to make a trade to try and help us, I've got that extra 3 or 4, which is usually about all you need to make a trade at the trade deadline to make your roster better. And if there's not anything there, then you go into the next draft, you've got an extra pick. But I would always want to come out of one draft with at least one bonus pick in the following draft.
Yeah, look, I think that's important. I think you touched on a couple of things that are really important. I think the trade piece is terrific. I think when you're drafting this year, you always have to kind of draft with next year in mind in terms of you just want to have capital and currency. In terms of what I want to come out with, you talked about 3 starters. I just think it's important. Those first two rounds we got to hit. But more importantly, I got to hit on my first-round picks. My first-round picks have to be guys that come in and they're starters, and ideally, you would like them to be starters at a high level. But you and I have talked about it, and I don't know if this is all the way a Baltimore thing, but you can win a lot of games just hitting the ball in the fairway. I don't need to crush it. I don't need to hit it 300 yards. But if I hit it 250 right in the middle, it sets up my next shot. The main thing is let's just make sure that the guys that we take in the first round are guys that we know that we can trust, we can count on, we can depend on them coming in, being solid starters or more. And so spend the bulk of your time really mining the first round, making sure you get it right on the first round pick, because the league really is comprised of first round picks and some second rounders. When you go and you look at the Pro Bowl rosters, and I know people talk about it being watered down, the bulk of the Pro Bowl roster are first and second round picks. Make sure you hit on those picks.
No, that's good stuff, man. Well, this was fun going through all these questions, Buck. Had a fun discussion there at the top as well, just kind of ripping through these questions. And again, hashtag AskMTS if you want to keep dropping those. Or the other place you can put them, and we will definitely see them, is if you leave us a review there on Apple Podcasts and drop your questions in there. We will get to those as well. I think that's going to do it for us. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, this is great, man. I love doing this thing. I can't wait for us to set up another kind of Ask MTS situation.
Yeah, we'll get them rolling here. It's good to catch up, fun conversation. We'll have a bunch of video content coming your way soon as well. You can be on the lookout for that. NFL.com/MTS video, as well as the YouTube channel, NFL Podcast. You can find that on YouTube. So that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for listening. Nabil, great job collecting all these questions, producing the show. We appreciate you. We'll catch you next time right here on Move the Sticks.